Have to face the right way to say that. Anyway, good to see everybody. Hope you've had a good day. Good crowd again this morning. So I think Andy said like 464. So we have, our attendance has just been really great. Really exciting and encouraging. So anyway, good to see you guys back tonight. Sermon on the Mount. I want to continue with our study of this amazing sermon. One of the things I have enjoyed this time as I have studied through the Sermon on the Mount, and I mentioned this when we started, but I've been trying to take a step back and see some bigger themes that are here instead of just looking at it verse by verse. I've tried to emphasize in my notes and also in our teaching that, you know, this is a sermon that was given to Jews, and it was given to Jews who had been taught by the scribes and Pharisees some things that just weren't right. They've been taught a lot of just oral tradition that had just been made up, and so Jesus is having to address a lot of those things. He's trying to change, and we're going to see this in tonight's text especially, but he's trying to change their viewpoint from Judaism, which in their minds was very ritualistic. I've got to do this and this and this and this, and God will be happy with me. So Jesus is taking this ritualistic type of religion and trying to put it into a heart religion. And so if you read the Sermon on the Mount with that in mind, all of a sudden a lot of things begin to come to view as what is Jesus doing here. So we've gone through the Beatitudes, and we looked at those eight or nine, depending on how you count them, Beatitudes, and Jesus is saying, I want for you to choose wisely. And so every one of those we talked about, these ideas are a choice. So choose wisely, have these attitudes in ourselves. He will then move from there to talk about kind of the responsibility. And the Jews had this responsibility even from Moses back in the day about being the salt of the earth and being the light of the world. That was their job. It is our job as well. But again, remember, this was written to Jews. That was their job. Their job was to be a light to the world. Jesus will then, he'll follow that up by saying, look, guys, I didn't come to abolish the law. He'd been accused of that apparently. So Jesus, what are you trying to do? Get rid of the law? You're trying to abolish it? Jesus says no. What Jesus was trying to do was explain to them what the law really meant. The Pharisees had missed it. And Jesus saying, I've come to fulfill this thing. I have come to live this out. And you remember we talk about the law? What was wrong with the law? So what was wrong with the law from a legal point of view? Nothing. Nothing wrong with it legally. But what was wrong with the law from a spiritual point of view? It doesn't forgive sin. All it can do is tell you what was wrong. There's nothing in there. So there was the precursor of the sacrifices, but all the sacrifice did, according to the book of Hebrews, is bring to mind what they had done wrong. Because the blood of Jesus had not been shed yet to forgive sin, so there wasn't really forgiveness then. During their day, obviously it would go backwards. We kind of understand all that, how all that worked. But the law was our tutor, according to Paul, to teach us about Christ. So Jesus said, I've come to fulfill this thing. I'm not taking anything away. I'm coming to fulfill it. So look at me and listen to me. So if you look down at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 20, this is kind of where we started last week. Jesus will say in verse 20, he started kind of a new series of teachings here. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven. So he's talking about righteousness. Remember, he's talking again about this is a heart issue, not a ritualistic issue. This is a heart issue. Our righteousness needs to be greater than the scribes and Pharisees. And so Jesus then is going to give, starting in verse 21, 6 examples. 6 examples of things people said about the law. And then he's going to tell what the actual intent of the law was. So again, he's referring, this is Old Testament stuff. is what he's referring to. This is what God had in mind all the time. By way of reminder, this language was a device that had been used as the rabbis engaged in debate. You have heard it said. So this was, Jesus is turning their own arguments on themselves. I'll remind you of this again in the next couple sections, but keep in mind that this section is dealing with the understanding of the first century Jews had of the old law. That's crucial here. It's their understanding. Also keep in mind that much of what Jesus said in this section contains a measure of hyperbole and wordplay. So when Jesus says, gouge your eyes out, he's not really telling us to gouge our eyes out. So we need to read it with some wisdom, okay, as Jesus uses some descriptive words as we go through this. Jesus says in this section of wordplay, also keep in mind the last sentence there, that the teaching here is not all the teachings on these subjects. These are just illustrations. These are examples. So it doesn't cover all of the subjects, nor does it cover all the information in Scripture about these subjects. It's just a little bloop, a little blip, in order for Jesus to teach a lesson here about what they think is going on. Okay? So I think a lot of folks have come to this section, come to the Sermon on the Mount, and have grabbed one or two verses here and then made an entire dogmatic doctrine from those two verses. We can't do that. We cannot do that. We got to take all of the teachings in Scripture and understand the background and the context in which these things were said. All right. All right. So last week we took a look at regarding anger and murder, and here are the other six. Regarding adultery, which is where we'll start here in just a minute, regarding divorce, regarding the taking of oaths, regarding taking revenge, and then regarding enemies. So there are the six examples that Jesus uses in this particular section. All right, so starting in verse 27 down through verse 30, let's see what Jesus has to say about adultery. Verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off, throw it away from you. It is better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. So there's the instructions about adultery. Now, according to their understanding of the law, what were they permitted to do and how were they allowed to behave? According to their understanding and what the scribes and Pharisees had said about adultery, this idea.
I guess if they wasn't engaging in the act, they were okay.
That's right. And really, they took it that far. Basically, you can do anything that you want. They thought like a high school boy, is what they did. You take it as far as you want, as long as you don't actually commit the act. And they were taught that's what the scribes and Pharisees would teach. So that's what Jesus says. Now, you've been told don't commit adultery. But Jesus then says something else. So how had they mistreated the law here? How had they misrepresented what God said?
They focused on the letter of the law to do what they want rather than the intent.
Exactly right. So they had actually grabbed the actual letter of the law. The law says don't commit adultery. I didn't commit adultery. I did everything else, but I did not commit adultery. And so that's where they would take that. So they were misrepresenting what God intended as God gave those particular laws. So one teaching that was Jesus trying to communicate with the verses that follow. So verse 28 down through verse 30, what is Jesus now trying to communicate to us and to them about adultery?
If you do it in your heart, then you commit adultery.
So it starts a long time before the actual act. The actual act. Now that's a violation. That's a sin. That's the accumulation, though, of a series of sins that has taken place up until that one. So, in the Greek, the phrase there, look at a woman lustfully, is actually the phrase lustful look. If we grab that and look at that word. So there's a lot of misunderstandings here, and I've been in conversations with people about this. So what is the intent of the phrase lustful look in verse 28? Is Jesus making lust and the physical act of adultery on equal ground? That's a question that I think is a good question, but it's one that this text presents it to us. If they are equal, now here's my recommendation, my understanding. If they are equal, then every wife who has ever been a wife has grounds for divorce. Because every man, save maybe one or two since the world began, has looked at a woman and went, oh, I'm just being honest with you, ladies. Sorry if that disappoints you. But that is the way men are wired. Now, my question is, does that mean that having lust and the physical act, are those equivalent to one another? Okay, good. They are both sin. Okay? So from that point of view, they are equivalent. Is the consequence of those the same? No. So when a man, even if a man, I would suggest, even if a man indulges himself in the sinful act of looking at pornography, and I mean, he just really gets into it, okay? That is a lustful act. That is a lustful look. He has allowed himself into that world. He has not committed the act of adultery. Is he a sinner? Yes. Is he going to answer that before God? Yes. But that is not the physical act of adultery that Jesus will then describe in the next section that will free and remove the bond in a marriage. Now it can lead to that, but that in and of itself I don't believe is. Oh, somebody disagrees with me. That's all right. Go ahead.
Depending upon your definition, I guess, of lust, I may look at a beautiful woman and say, wow, that's a gorgeous lady.
Right.
But I'm not gonna, but when she offers me to go home with her and I say, no, sorry, I'm married, I'm not lusting after her. I'm admiring her maybe, but that's,
right.
That's lusting means is there's a content of desire there.
Right.
You
so,
would like that.
Yeah, and so, yeah. So if you go back to this phrase, lustful look, that we find in the Greek, that's what that term means. It means that you are looking at a woman, you are dwelling on that, and you are allowing your mind then to want to dwell. It is so there's a word for that in what is it? It's not Google. Is it Google? Goggle. Ogle. There it is. It is one of those words. It had two O's in it.
I always find it interesting in that study that even though there's two people, they always want to stone the woman.
Yeah.
Versus the man, and he's doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course this text, who's guilty in this text? The man is. The man. And matter of fact, it's addressed only to the man. I would suggest to you that a woman can be as guilty of this as the man can. Now, obviously, she's not looking at me, which is a good thing, but it can still happen. And you know what's crazy? In our world, the number of women in our country right now that are looking at pornography is the largest it's ever been. And it is one of the fastest growing markets in the pornography field right now, is women looking at that. I don't understand that. I'm not a woman, but what I thought I knew about women, that doesn't make sense to me. But it is a fast growing market right now. Oh, Russ, did you?
Where do you come up with that? Because to me, it says God reach our heart.
Right.
And I think every guy, I agree with you, every guy, if a woman you're in a red light, you know, a girl walks across and she's in a bikini, the first thing a guy's gonna do instinctively is to look.
Right,
But if he's trained himself to look the other way,
that's right.
and it takes work, you know, I think that's where, if you're looking at her and you're thinking all that stuff intentionally.
Right.
And you know it's wrong, to me, that's, your heart
That's
is
right.
broken at that point.
No, I agree with that. It's sin.
So the.
It just does not free your wife from,
Your wife.
it doesn't free your wife from the marriage bond.
And how do you come up with that? I'm curious, because if a guy does pornography,
Yeah.
and he's got that in his life, men know what that can do to them mentally.
Right.
And every other way, and they have the ability to not do that unless
Right.
there's something mentally wrong with them.
Right.
Or their heart doesn't want them to change. You know?
Right.
I mean, anyway.
Well, I'm just,
wondering if
what
we're in
Jesus
that-
says is, where does he say that adultery happened? In the heart. It is heart adultery, but it is not the physical act of adultery. There's a difference there. And I know a lot of-
How do we know that? That's what I'm saying. Where does that come from? Is there verbiage or definitions in the original language that explains that?
Well, I guess the whole idea of adultery, and we would have to do a word study on that. This is a great question, by the way. And I'm not real sure I've got a good answer for it. But I think the verbiage, as we were to look at that Greek word, which is porneia, will indicate the sexual act in that context against my wife with another woman. So that's, although it's going on in my mind, in my heart with the pornography.
Well, and it will also, as we know as men, if that continues in your life, sooner
Oh,
or
yeah.
later, you're gonna take advantage of that. I mean, you're gonna weaken your ability to stop.
That's right.
And
And again, I'm not saying it's not a sin. It is a sin. It is a grievous sin. It is even a sin against my wife.
But it will not send you to
But
hell.
I do-
Leave that in your life.
If what?
It won't condemn us to hell. If
I believe it will,
if
yeah,
we
absolutely.
leave
That's
that in
not,
our
you
life.
misunderstand what I'm saying. It doesn't give your wife the grounds to divorce you.
Okay, all right.
It is wrong, 100% wrong. Sorry, Jeanette, but you can't. Oh, yeah, we got a couple other comments over here.
To me, it kind of parallels hate versus murder, you know.
There you go.
It's wrong to hate your brother.
Right.
That's a sin, and in your heart, you know, we're told you've committed murder, but you haven't actually committed the act of murder. You're
Right.
not guilty.
It's still a sin. It's still wrong before God. But it is not murder in and of itself. Okay, somebody had their hand up here. Yeah, go ahead.
I use the New King James Version, and in verse 32, when it says, it's given a head bone, it says, for any reason except sexual immorality. And then in Matthew 19:9, when it talks about, he says, sexual immorality, I believe that's a different Greek word than the word used for adultery. So that's the physical action of adultery right there.
Yeah.
So just wanted to throw that
Yeah,
out.
so anyways, we can look at those words. I just didn't do it for tonight.
And
so.
one more question I've had for you.
Okay.
You can answer this in a different class.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
I mean, seriously. So did Abraham commit adultery? Did, the guy that had all the concubines, did he commit adultery? And did they marry all these women so that they may not, if they didn't commit adultery, if they didn't have concubines, did they marry 10 women so they could have 10 wives, so then they didn't commit adultery? With, you know, the other nine?
This is above my pay grade. My initial reaction is, yes, he committed adultery. That's my initial reaction. God didn't give him permission to take her. That was his decision. In the past, God overlooked godlessness. So God overlooked some things. It was never his will. It was never his desire for that to happen. Men made bad choices. God were able to use him anyway.
How do you,
But,
that's temptation, right?
oh yeah.
So when you deal with it, it's one temptation.
That's right.
If you're around it, get away from it.
That's exactly right. And that's what, that's the whole point here, isn't it? That's what Jesus is saying. Don't go down that road. Don't go down that road.
He never intended for divorce to be a part
That's right.
of your work.
No, that's right. Back from the garden, and Jesus always, when he talks about marriage, takes it back to the garden. Because that is the plan. Everything else other than that is a violation of what God wants. So, yeah, Jim.
Well, to admire a physically attractive lady.
Sure.
Is not to desire necessarily.
Right.
That's what we do all the time, everywhere we're at, almost.
That's right.
I don't know, we got in our heads.
Right.
I don't know if you stop, but we do that all the time, whether it's on TV, or on the street, or wherever, at the beach. You see gorgeous ladies with nice shapes and or whatever you think is beautiful, and that
Right.
varies. And that's, but there's no, if they walk up and say, well, let's go somewhere, you say no.
That's right. Well, again, there's intent of the heart. There's intent there. And there is, again, this lustful look in the Greek there is this idea of dwelling on that. So you see, do what?
It's the second and third look.
Yeah. Well, it's when the girl walks across in front of you in a bikini, and instead of turning your head, you stare at her and go, you know, and lose your breath. That's when it gets bad.
And we as men, to answer that question, we as men know that if a guy stares at the girl, that's gonna stir up things.
I know, exactly right.
Hormones and everything else in your body. And to me, if it reaches that point, that's not right.
I know. That's when, yeah, that's James chapter 1 that talks about sin, which we don't have time to go there. Hold on, let me go back behind you real quick, Beck.
Okay. I think a lot of this
You're not
too,
looking at a section, you're looking at it from.
Go ahead, Lynn.
I think a lot of this too, Jesus, I can't, I'm sorry. My brain doesn't work that way, I can't. I can't figure it out.
Okay, all right, try this.
Whenever he brings this up, I feel like a lot of it too is, you know, a woman knows, and it's going to damage your marriage. She knows, whether she knows or not, she knows.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's one thing that he's trying to, you know, help keep
Yeah,
her happy.
it is not healthy for the man or the wife.
Yeah.
Excellent
And
point.
once she
That's-
finds out too,
that's
it's
exactly
gonna cause
right.
even more damage,
Yeah.
and then where are you gonna be? Because she
Yeah.
may not ever be able to forgive you just because of the way that she is made.
Yeah. Beck.
That same question I have had, because I have a niece whose husband, the way she put it was he emotionally committed adultery.
Right.
He spent time with this other woman for a good long while before finally, my niece just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And he didn't commit the actual physical act until after, you know, she left. But he did with the same woman, you know,
Yeah.
so it was going to happen.
Well, at least he didn't fess up to it.
No, he didn't. Oh, well, that's exactly.
So,
right.
you know, I have my doubts.
Right.
When I hear any story like that, I'm kind of more of a skeptic.
Layne, isn't he trying to explain to them the difference in spiritual and physical?
That's right.
How it can cause
That's right.
the sin.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in the book of James, real quick, I wasn't gonna say this, but I will. In the book of James, I think it's chapter 1, he talks about the process, the process that you go through when we sin. And sin begins with the eyes. And then it is conceived in the heart, and then sin happens. And so that's the idea, that as we see it in our eyes, that's not sin. And that's what Jim keeps pointing out, and he's right. That's just life. That's just life. But if we allow that sin to conceive, and I heard a fellow one time describe it this way. He said, once you give yourself permission, then sin has occurred. If I give myself permission to have an affair on my wife, I may never have the opportunity to actually go through with it. But once I give myself the permission, I have violated my covenant with God. I have sinned. Now, that still, until that physical act is consummated, it's not the physical act of adultery. but it is a violation of that relationship that we have, and it's a violation before me and God. So there is this idea of we can't control our eyes, and men, we need to. And especially, it's summertime, the clothes are only getting more scant, more scantily clad the longer that we go into these summer months. The point Jesus is making here, don't look at a woman lustfully. So the teaching is pretty easy. We maybe making it a little bit more difficult here, but it's pretty easy. Jesus said, don't look at a woman lustfully. Turn your eyes away. So, yes, ma'am.
When, women and girls and training up girls, we have to be mindful of this right here is speaking to us too.
That's right.
We need to be careful of how we're dressing.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So this covers both sides of that.
yeah.
And but for us, the women that are out in the world that we run into all the time, you go to Walmart, the other day I was driving, and this was, at camp, it always kind of brings back to mind, how our young ladies are supposed to be dressing, which they don't. But anyway, so I was thinking about that as I was going to Walmart because I was back in town. But between my house and Walmart, before I got out of the car in Walmart, I counted 7 women that I felt like were dressed inappropriately. And so I was kind of doing like Russell doing, I better drive off the road over here, But it's a constant battle, but it's a decision that we have to make as men. So anyway, you talked about this. Where's this line of delineation between noticing that a woman is attractive and lusting after her? Well, it's this heart issue of staring and letting the mind flow, and we all know the rest of that. So there's our passage, James 1:14-15. So Jesus then talks about here's how important this is. Pluck your eye out or cut your arm off. Both of which, now, is it a true statement? Is it a true statement? It is better to go to heaven with one eye than go to hell with two.
Yes.
That's a true statement. Is it better to go with one hand instead of two? Yeah. So what Jesus said here is absolutely true. But Jesus does not want us plucking our eyes out and cutting our arms off. Can a man lust after a woman in his mind with 0 eyes? We know that's the truth. Because although the eyes are the catalyst, the adultery happens here. It's a heart issue. And again, that's what Jesus is saying. It is a heart issue. To what extent should we go? Man, go as far as you need to go. Train ourselves up as men. So, anyway, any other comment there? Boy, that was a little longer conversation than I thought it was going to be. It's all good. It's an important conversation.
I think about, and I may have my numbers wrong, but the scriptures say Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Right.
And then just a few verses later, he's into idol worship.
I know it. Yeah. His wives pulled his heart away from the one and only God. Does anybody know where polygamy started? You know whose descendant it was? Cain's. One of Cain's descendants. Cain brought a bunch of bad stuff into this world, by the way. Polygamy was one. Murder was one. One of his descendants brought in iron, the making of iron implements, which then turned into war instruments. So anyway, Cain was not the best guy.
Don't think we'll see him in heaven, do you?
Ma'am?
Don't think we'll see him in heaven, do you?
I will make no comment on that. I would not want to be him and he could have repented late in his life. So, there's always that, maybe he got things fixed. I don't know. All right. So this is kind of on the tails of this. Let's look at verse 31 and 32. So Jesus continues. It was said, so there's our phrase again, it was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the reason of unchastity, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So again, in this idea of divorce and remarriage, what was the common teaching? You may know what the common teaching was of the day when it comes to marriage, divorce, and remarriage?
Put her away.
Put her away.
She burns your toast, you can kick her out, you can divorce her. She has, and the way they would phrase that, she burned my toast, therefore she has violated covenant. So the phrase there, again, the Greek phrase that is used in this context is this idea of breaking covenant. And so that's what they would say. She burned my toast, she broke covenant. She won't keep the house clean, she broke covenant. Therefore I can divorce her. So, I mean, there was just, a man could walk out on his front porch, he had to say it 3 times. I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and then she was divorced. So, pretty easy to, even easier than here in Oklahoma. Pretty easy divorce back in the 1st century. And the teaching around this goes back to Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. Again, for time's sake, we won't go back and look at that, but if you want to look, that's kind of the core of the teaching there about writing a woman a certificate of divorce. That's all kind of explained there in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Again, how would they misuse this law? They took this teaching in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and used this phrase that she broke covenant with me, and just let it go to, to every context that they want. But what in the world is Jesus trying to communicate? And where, and this will go back to Matthew chapter 19, where does Jesus end up taking this, the marriage, divorce, remarriage issue? Where does he take it?
Back to adultery.
Yeah, he takes it, what time frame does he take it back to? Creation. He takes it back to Adam and Eve. He says from the beginning it wasn't this way. God created man and woman. So God's plan from the beginning has always been, and I don't know of anybody that will argue with this, God's plan has always been one man for one woman for life, and then he added, because of the hardness of our hearts, he added the one exception, adultery. And that is the one thing that I think husbands and wives both have a very difficult time. Somebody talked about forgiveness. That is such a violation when it comes to the physical act of adultery. That is hard to forgive, and I would suggest probably for us as humans, maybe the hardest. April and I, we've never experienced that. We've never had to deal with that. But from others that I have talked to, it's hard. And I think that's why God allows this exception. Because he just knows, he designed us to become one flesh. And that one fleshness is physical, it is spiritual, it is mental, it is part of our healing as humans. It is incredible what God did for us. And boy, when that's violated, wow, that I think is just very, very difficult. I realize people forgive, and I appreciate that forgiveness immensely. That is huge in their life. But it is, I think, very, very difficult. So again, that's just been God's plan. So again, keep in mind there's other passages to consider. This isn't the only one. There's others, Matthew 19, Mark 10, Luke 16, and then also 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and 7 has a fairly lengthy discussion as Paul writes to the church at Corinth. Paul in those chapters will say, and by the way, here's some things that Jesus did not talk about. And so Paul will deal with some other issues that kind of tie into that issue. And God's plan, again, I think is what Jesus is teaching here. One man for one woman for life with one exception. And we stick to that. Wherever we are, we stick to that. That's what God wants from us. Okay? All right. I'm going to move on because there's probably about 2 hours worth of discussion we could have on that. And you're going to ask me questions I have no idea about. So we take those up. I think we got time for one more. Regarding oaths, so 33 to 37. This is also a rather interesting discussion here. 33. Again, you have heard it said, the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oaths at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool of the King, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you make an oath on your head, for you can't make one hair white or black. But let your statements be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. All right, now let's talk about oaths. What was their understanding of the law here when it came to oaths? This is actually described in Matthew chapter 23 when Jesus is talking with the Pharisees. Anybody remember what was their idea of an oath?
You could swear by, I don't like your head, but you couldn't swear by your, I don't know.
Yeah, so they put conditions on these oaths.
Yeah.
So you could swear by the temple,
Yeah.
for example, which means you could get out of that oath. But if you swore by the gold in the temple, then you were bound to that oath. That was part of their oral tradition. Okay? You could, and again, these examples here that Jesus illustrates, these are examples of things that they would do. They would swear by one thing, and it was not binding. And then they would swear by something else, which was a higher order oath, and then it was binding. And Jesus here is, so you go back to Numbers chapter 30 and then Deuteronomy chapter 23, and it talks a little bit about these oaths. Keep your oaths is what the old law will say. Keep them. And then there's a whole description there, I don't remember if it's in Numbers or Deuteronomy, about the various examples of oath keeping with daughters and husbands and wives and whatnot. There's a whole list of those. But the point was, keep your oaths. So their idea was, well, you can make an oath here and you don't have to keep an oath over here, and you do. They had misused the law. That was never God's plan. God didn't want us making oaths at all. What he tells them in the law is, if you make one, keep it. That's what he told. He didn't tell them to make them. He said, if you make it, keep it. Which, again, they weren't doing it because they were finding what they thought was a loophole and all that.
So it's just as simple as just do what you say you're going to do?
Just do what you say you're going to do. And that's what verse 34 to 37 is all about. Just keep your word. Do what you're going to do. Now, here's what comes up. Is Jesus teaching against us signing legal documents? Or is he teaching against us making marriage vows? Is he teaching, if he's not, what's he teaching? What's he saying here? Do you see the issue that comes up here? I know we sell homes or buy homes. What do we got to do? We got to sign a legal document about it, right?
Yeah.
Is Jesus saying don't sign them?
No.
I think he's saying don't try to find a loophole.
Don't keep your word. Be a man of your word.
Yeah.
Be a man of your word.
What about in legal proceedings like in court where you have to promise, put your hand on the Bible and swear to tell
That's
the
right.
truth?
So
But that's all man-made.
That's right. So if I go to court, right? If I go to court, I'm going to tell the truth,
Right.
whether I put my hand on that Bible or not.
Right.
I will put my hand on that Bible as a symbol to the crowd. Yeah, fine. If that's what the law says, I don't mind doing that. I'm going to keep my word regardless. So I think the teaching there is Jesus is not being legalistic about us don't sign that document. We got to sign legal documents. It's part of the law of the land. So you can't buy anything without some kind of a legal document. So, again, that is not what Jesus is trying to communicate to us here. The verbiage looks that way, doesn't it? Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Try that in a court and see what happens. You'll get thrown in jail. So it's not going to fly. I'll be right back over to you. Go ahead.
Well, but right from the start, he says, keep the oaths you have made to the Lord.
Oh yeah.
That's the one oath that he wanted us to keep from the beginning.
No, exactly right.
A
And
oath.
that will drive
So
every other
he
thing in our
covers
life.
himself, yeah.
Absolutely.
You've got it
Yeah.
fully covered.
That's right.
Well,
Keep that up.
If you don't, you're lying, and that's obvious.
That's right. That's right.
I was just gonna say, you know, he had just got through telling them, you know, we're the salt of the earth, and we're to do that, we're to stand on our truth. If we don't
Yep.
have truth, we don't have anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so anyway, we will end right there. Keep reading the Sermon on the Mount, so for our Wednesday nighters, I will be in the Dill, and Brett Moore will be teaching in here Wednesday night. I'll be back in here Sunday night with Sermon on the Mount. A week from Wednesday night is a mission presentation, so we will all be in the auditorium. And then back in here the following Wednesday night. And then remember, in July, we're going to start our men's class and our ladies class, which I'm still pretty excited about those new classes. So, all right, let's end right there. Brother Gordon, you want to dismiss us in prayer, please?
Gracious Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the opportunity to come and study your word and listen to wise teachings. Thankful for Layne and his ability to do that. Help us, Father, to take these words and live them out in our lives. Be with us as we continue this week and keep us safe. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, brother. Thanks, guys.